Welcome to IELTS CELPEEP Master Prep, your trusted source for real exam-based practice tests. Every test you see here is inspired by current exam trends, and each one comes with full model solutions to help you master every section. Here's our daily schedule. IELTS tests drop every morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and CLP tests every evening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. No matter which exam you're preparing for, we've got you covered every single day. Are you ready for today's test? Give it your best shot and comment your score. The top 5 scorers will be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter and awards. Want your name included? Let's begin.
Do you prefer exercising indoors or outdoors, and why?
I prefer exercising outdoors because I like fresh air. Usually I go jogging in the park near my house in the morning. Sometimes I also play badminton with my friends outside. I think outdoor exercise is more enjoyable than going to a gym because you can see nature and feel relaxed.
To be honest, I'm more inclined towards outdoor exercise because I find it far more refreshing than being cooped up in a gym. I regularly go for a run along the Riverside Trail near my neighborhood, which helps me clear my head after a long day at work. That said, during the rainy season I do switch to indoor workouts, mainly using a treadmill or following online fitness classes at home.
I'm a firm believer in outdoor exercise, primarily because I find that being surrounded by nature significantly enhances both my physical performance and mental well-being. I tend to go trail running along the coastal paths near where I live, which is not only a fantastic cardiovascular workout but also incredibly scenic and calming. Having said that, I wouldn't dismiss indoor exercise entirely. On particularly harsh winter days, I resort to high-intensity interval training at my local leisure center, which serves as a perfectly adequate alternative.
Has your interest in any particular sport changed over the years?
Yes, it has changed. When I was young, I liked playing football very much with my school friends. But now I don't play football anymore because I don't have enough time. These days I prefer swimming because it is good for my health and I can do it alone without needing a team.
Absolutely. My sporting interests have shifted quite a bit over the years. Growing up, I was really into basketball and used to play competitively for my school team. However, once I started university, I gradually lost touch with team sports due to scheduling conflicts. More recently, I've taken up yoga, which I never would have considered in my younger years, but I've come to appreciate how beneficial it is for both flexibility and stress relief.
My sporting preferences have undergone a rather dramatic transformation, I'd say. Throughout my adolescence, I was absolutely obsessed with competitive tennis and would dedicate several hours each day to rigorous training sessions. As I transitioned into adulthood, however, the demands of my professional life made it increasingly impractical to commit to such an intensive regime. Consequently, I gravitated towards more solitary and meditative forms of exercise, particularly long-distance cycling, which offers me the perfect blend of physical exertion and contemplative solitude that I find deeply restorative.
Do you think people in your country are doing enough to stay physically fit?
I think many people in my country are not doing enough exercise. Most people are very busy with their jobs and they don't have time to go to the gym. Also, young people spend too much time on their phones and computers. However, I have noticed that some people are starting to join fitness classes, which is a good sign.
Honestly, I'd say it's a bit of a mixed picture. On one hand, there's been a noticeable surge in gym memberships and outdoor running groups in major cities, which suggests a growing awareness of the importance of fitness. On the other hand, sedentary lifestyles remain alarmingly prevalent, particularly among office workers who spend the bulk of their day sitting at a desk. I think the government could do more to promote physical activity through better public sports facilities and awareness campaigns.
That's a thought-provoking question. I'd argue that there's a widening disparity in fitness levels across my country. Urban professionals, particularly millennials, have wholeheartedly embraced the wellness movement. Boutique fitness studios and marathon events have proliferated in recent years. Conversely, in more rural and economically disadvantaged areas, access to proper sporting infrastructure remains woefully inadequate, which inevitably discourages regular physical activity. Furthermore, despite the growing health consciousness in certain demographics, obesity rates continue to climb, which rather suggests that awareness alone is insufficient without systemic changes to dietary habits and urban planning.
What electronic device do you use most frequently in your daily life?
The device I use most is my smartphone. I use it every day for many things like checking messages, watching videos, and looking at social media. I also use it to take photos and set alarms. I think it is very useful because I can do almost everything with just one device.
Without a doubt, my smartphone is the device I rely on most heavily. It's essentially become an extension of myself. I use it for everything from managing my schedule and responding to emails to streaming podcasts during my commute. What I find particularly impressive is how multifunctional modern smartphones have become. Mine has practically replaced my camera, my alarm clock, and even my wallet now that contactless payments are so widespread.
I'd have to say my laptop is absolutely indispensable to my daily routine, even more so than my smartphone. As someone who works remotely in a creative field, I spend the vast majority of my day on it, drafting proposals, collaborating with colleagues via video conferencing platforms, and conducting research. What distinguishes it from my phone is the sheer productivity it enables. The larger screen and full keyboard make multitasking infinitely more efficient. I genuinely couldn't fathom navigating my professional responsibilities without it, though I acknowledge this level of screen dependency is something I ought to be more mindful of.
Do you think children today spend too much time using electronic gadgets?
Yes, I believe children today use gadgets too much. Many kids play games on tablets and watch videos on phones for many hours each day. This is not good because they don't play outside enough and it can hurt their eyes. I think parents should limit the time children spend on devices and encourage them to do outdoor activities.
I do think there's a legitimate concern about excessive screen time among children. It's become increasingly common to see even toddlers glued to tablets, which I find rather troubling. Prolonged gadget use can have detrimental effects on children's eyesight, posture, and social development, as they miss out on vital face-to-face interactions. That said, I wouldn't advocate for banning technology altogether. Educational apps and programs can be tremendously beneficial when used in moderation and under parental supervision.
It's a contentious issue, and I believe the reality is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Whilst there's compelling evidence that excessive screen exposure can impair children's cognitive development, attention spans, and interpersonal skills, it would be overly simplistic to demonize technology wholesale. The crux of the matter lies in how these gadgets are utilized. Passive consumption of mindless content is categorically different from engaging with interactive learning platforms that stimulate critical thinking. Ultimately, I'd argue that the onus falls on parents and educators to curate a balanced digital diet, ensuring that technology serves as a tool for enrichment rather than a substitute for meaningful human connection.
Is there a new piece of technology you would like to buy in the near future?
Yes, I would like to buy a smartwatch. I think it would be very useful for tracking my exercise and checking my heart rate. Also, I could receive notifications without looking at my phone all the time. The main problem is that good smartwatches are quite expensive, so I need to save some money first before I can buy one.
I've had my eye on one of the latest noise-cancelling headphones for quite some time now. I commute by train daily, and the constant background noise can be incredibly distracting, especially when I'm trying to listen to audiobooks or concentrate on work. From what I've read in reviews, the sound quality and battery life of the newest models are remarkably impressive. I'm planning to treat myself to a pair once the next round of sales comes along, as they're a bit steep at full retail price.
I've been seriously contemplating investing in a high-end e-reader, specifically one with an e-ink display. As an avid reader, I find myself perpetually surrounded by towering stacks of paperbacks, which is becoming rather impractical given my limited living space. An e-reader would allow me to carry an entire library in my bag without the physical burden, and the e-ink technology supposedly replicates the experience of reading on paper, which would alleviate my concerns about eye strain from prolonged reading sessions. Beyond the practical advantages, there's also an environmental dimension. Reducing my paper consumption aligns with my broader efforts to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle, which I find increasingly important.
Please begin speaking now.
I want to talk about a book called To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read it when I was about 16 years old because my English teacher recommended it to us. Actually, it was part of our school reading list, so I had to read it for class. The book is about a young girl called Scout who lives in a small town in America during the 1930s. Her father is a lawyer and he decides to defend a black man who is accused of a crime he didn't do. I think this book had a big impact on me because it made me think about fairness and justice. Before reading it, I didn't really think much about these kinds of issues. The story showed me how people can be treated badly just because of their skin color, and that was quite shocking to me. It also taught me that standing up for what is right is important, even when it is difficult. I still remember this book very clearly even now.
I'd like to describe a book that left a lasting impression on me, which is 1984 by George Orwell. I first came across it during my final year of secondary school, around 2019, when a friend lent me his copy after we'd had a discussion about politics and surveillance. The novel is set in a dystopian future where a totalitarian government, led by the mysterious figure known as Big Brother, controls every aspect of citizens' lives. The protagonist, Winston Smith, secretly rebels against the regime by keeping a forbidden diary and pursuing a clandestine love affair. What struck me most profoundly about this book was how remarkably relevant it felt to the modern world. Orwell wrote it in 1949, yet the themes of mass surveillance, propaganda, and the manipulation of truth seemed to mirror many of the concerns we face today with social media and data privacy. It fundamentally changed the way I consume news and information. I became far more critical of what I read online and started questioning narratives rather than simply accepting them at face value. I would say it genuinely shaped my worldview and made me a more thoughtful and discerning person overall.
I'd like to talk about a book that profoundly influenced my perspective on life, and that would be *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind* by Yuval Noah Harari. I stumbled upon it quite serendipitously in a second-hand bookshop whilst traveling through Edinburgh in the summer of 2020. The striking cover art caught my eye, and after reading the blurb, I was immediately captivated. The book traces the entire arc of human history, from the emergence of Homo sapiens in East Africa through to the present day, examining how our species came to dominate the planet. What makes it particularly compelling is Harari's argument that humanity's success is largely attributable to our unique capacity for collective fiction, the ability to believe in shared myths such as nations, religions, and economic systems. This concept was genuinely revelatory for me. It fundamentally altered the lens through which I view social structures and institutions. Where I had previously taken things like monetary systems and political ideologies for granted as somehow natural or inevitable, I began to recognize them as sophisticated constructs that exist purely because we collectively agree they do. Furthermore, the book instilled in me an insatiable intellectual curiosity. It prompted me to delve into anthropology, evolutionary biology, and philosophy, disciplines I might never have explored otherwise. I would go so far as to say it was the catalyst for a complete intellectual awakening, and I have since recommended it to virtually everyone I know.
How important is it for children to develop a reading habit from a young age?
I think it's very important for children to read books when they are young. Reading helps them to learn new words and improve their language skills. Also, it can help them do better at school because they can understand things more easily. Some children prefer watching TV or playing games, which is a problem because they don't read enough. Parents should encourage their children to read more by buying them books and reading with them at bedtime. I believe if children start reading early, it will help them a lot in the future.
I'd argue it's absolutely crucial, and there's substantial evidence to support this view. Children who are exposed to books from an early age tend to develop stronger literacy skills, a broader vocabulary and, perhaps more importantly, greater empathy. When a child engages with a story, they're essentially stepping into someone else's shoes, which nurtures their emotional intelligence. That said, I think the manner in which reading is introduced matters enormously. If it's forced upon children as a chore, it can have the opposite effect and put them off entirely. The key, in my view, is to make reading an enjoyable and natural part of daily life rather than something that feels like an obligation.
I would contend that cultivating a reading habit in childhood is one of the single most valuable investments a society can make in its future. The benefits extend far beyond the obvious improvements in literacy and academic performance. Reading fiction, in particular, has been shown to foster cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, which is arguably a cornerstone of a well-functioning society. Moreover, in an era increasingly dominated by short-form digital content and algorithmically curated information, the capacity to engage with long-form text and sustain concentration over extended periods is becoming something of a rare commodity. Children who develop this skill early are, I believe, far better equipped to navigate the complexities of the modern information landscape. However, I would caution against being overly prescriptive about what children should read. The goal ought to be fostering a genuine love of reading, and if that begins with comic books or graphic novels rather than literary classics, I see absolutely no issue with that.
In what ways has technology changed people's reading habits in recent years?
Technology has changed reading habits a lot. Nowadays, many people read things on their phones or tablets instead of buying paper books. For example, people use apps like Kindle to download books. Also, social media means that people spend more time reading short posts and messages rather than long books. I think this is not always a good thing because people's attention spans are getting shorter. However, technology also has some advantages, like making books cheaper and easier to get. So overall, I think technology has both positive and negative effects on reading.
Technology has fundamentally transformed our reading habits in a number of significant ways. Perhaps the most obvious shift has been the move from physical books to digital formats. E-readers and tablets have made it possible to carry an entire library in one's pocket, which has undoubtedly increased convenience and accessibility. Beyond that, the rise of audiobooks has opened up reading to people who might not have engaged with traditional print, such as commuters or those with visual impairments. On the flip side, however, there's a growing body of research suggesting that our increasing reliance on screens is eroding our capacity for deep, sustained reading. We've become accustomed to skimming and scanning content rather than engaging with it thoughtfully. I find this trend rather concerning, particularly when it comes to younger generations.
The digital revolution has brought about a seismic shift in reading culture, and I think we're still only beginning to fully comprehend its ramifications. On one hand, technology has democratized access to literature in unprecedented ways. E-books, online libraries, and subscription services have effectively dismantled many of the financial and geographical barriers that once limited who could access certain texts. This is unequivocally a positive development. Simultaneously, however, the very architecture of the digital ecosystem, with its notifications, hyperlinks, and infinite scrolling, seems almost purpose-built to fragment our attention. There's a fascinating concept that the writer Nicholas Carr explores in his book, The Shallows, where he argues that the internet is literally rewiring our neural pathways, making us better at processing information rapidly but significantly worse at deep, contemplative reading. I find this hypothesis deeply persuasive and somewhat alarming. Furthermore, the algorithmic curation of content means that many people now exist within informational echo chambers, reading only material that reinforces their existing beliefs. So whilst technology has unquestionably broadened access, it has also, I would argue, narrowed the depth and diversity of what many people actually engage with.
Do you think governments should play a role in promoting literacy and reading culture?
Yes, I believe governments should help promote reading. They can do this by building more public libraries and making sure schools have good books for students. Also, they could organize reading programs or events to encourage people to read more. In some countries, many people cannot read well, which is a serious problem because it affects their ability to find good jobs. So the government has a responsibility to help these people. However, I also think families have an important role to play, not just the government. Parents should read to their children and set a good example.
I firmly believe that governments have not only a role but a genuine obligation to promote literacy and foster a reading culture. Literacy is, after all, the foundation upon which virtually all other forms of education and social participation are built. Without it, individuals are effectively excluded from meaningful engagement in civic life. In practical terms, this could involve sustained investment in public libraries, which I consider to be among the most important civic institutions in any society. Additionally, governments could introduce initiatives such as subsidized book schemes or national reading campaigns to make literature more accessible to disadvantaged communities. That said, I think it's important that such efforts don't become overly politicized. The goal should be to empower people to read widely and think independently, not to dictate what they should be reading. It's a delicate balance, but one that I believe is achievable with thoughtful policymaking.
This is a question I feel rather strongly about, and my answer would be an unequivocal yes, though with certain important qualifications. At the most fundamental level, ensuring universal literacy is arguably the single most impactful intervention a government can make in terms of social mobility and economic development. The data on this is overwhelming. Countries with higher literacy rates consistently demonstrate stronger democratic institutions, better public health outcomes, and greater economic resilience. So the pragmatic case for government involvement is, I think, beyond dispute. However, the question becomes considerably more nuanced when we move beyond basic literacy to the promotion of reading culture more broadly. I believe governments should create the infrastructure and conditions that enable a flourishing literary culture, well-funded public libraries, robust school curricula, support for independent publishers and bookshops, without crossing the line into prescribing what citizens ought to read. History offers us numerous cautionary tales of what happens when states attempt to control literary culture, and that is a path we must be vigilant about avoiding. Ultimately, the most effective approach is one that removes barriers, creates opportunities, and then trusts individuals to exercise their own intellectual agency.
Before you go, don't forget to like this video, share it with other test takers, and subscribe so you never miss your daily IELTS and CELPEEP tests. Drop your score in the comments. Your name could be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter. Stay consistent, stay focused, and keep leveling up with Master Prep.